We read in this week's parsha, Parshas Bamidbar, how on the second month of the second year, Moshe is told that Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, have to be counted. And the counting, the term used is Su, es Rosh B'nai Yisrael. And they have to be counted according to their paternal line. Su es Rosh Kaladas B'nai Yisrael Limishpchosam L'beis Avosam. The Mispar Shemos, the number according to the names, Kol Zochel Gugulosam, all the males, based on the Machzah Shekel. They have a silver coin. Rashi cites the Midrash. Since we left Egypt, we've been counted multiple times. What does counting indicate? A person counts something and recounts it. Evidently, you count something that you value. It's an expression of love, and you want to make sure and understand how many do you have, how many are left, has there been an attrition, what exactly is happening. Mitoch chiboson lefonov, because of the love lefonov before him, monosam kol shoch, he continuously counts them. Kishiyotzu Mitzrayim monon, when they left Egypt, he counted them. Shenoflu be'egel, and when they fell, there were casualties as a result of the golden calf. Monon leida minyan hanusorim, to know exactly after the casualties how many were left. At the time when he was going to allow his divine presence to enter in their midst, again he counts them. And now, the first of the year of the second month of the second year, again he counts them. So what does the counting indicate? It's mitoch chiboson. Rashi citing Chazal, the Midrash. Every word has meaning. Seemingly it would have been enough to say mitoch chiboson monon. What's mitoch chiboson lefonov? Because of the chiba, the love, which is before him. Now, when a person is in the forefront of a person's mind, we normally say, out of sight, out of mind. What about something, an experience, or a person has a relationship where the love for your child or for that individual is so inextricably connected to you that even when the person physically is not in your presence, it's before his eyes. The love that Hashem has for us is lefonov. We're always lefonov, we're always before him. We're always in the forefront of his mind. Everything is us. So it's not just he loves us, it's lefonov. It's something which is out of the ordinary, unusual. His mind, kaviyochel, God's focus, everything revolves around Klal Yisrael. Now the question is, why? He said, well, that's the intensity of love. That's the dimension of love. But the question is, why? We find later in Chumash Bamidbar, when God refers to us, to Klal Yisrael, in one pasuk, the appellation of Bnei Yisrael is mentioned 5 times in one pasuk. So Midrash says, if a person truly loves his child, and you mentioned his name once, the father doesn't say, and he, doesn't refer to the child by a pronoun. Every time he mentions the child, it's always by name. Why? Because of the exceptional level of love, by mentioning the name, it evokes a special feeling about that child. By saying the pronoun he or she, it's not the same thing. But saying Chaim, and there's only one Chaim, or one Shimon, or one Reuven, whatever it may be, or one Yosef, that evokes, by saying that, it touches the father in a certain way. So one pasuk, Hashem should refer to us 5 times by saying Bnei Yisrael. It's unusual. We know how careful the Torah is not to use extra words or extra letters. Why? Again, it's to display his exceptional love for us that he mentions us 5 times in one pasuk. Now the question is why. So Rashi says, why 5? Why is mentioned 5 times? Because it corresponds to Chamisha Chumshi Torah. So you'd say, the way seemingly what Chazal is saying, what the Medrash is saying, that the number 5, its connotation is Chamisha Chumshi Torah, which is special, which everything revolves around that. So the number 5 is special, so therefore he mentions us 5 times. It's much more than that. What Rashi, what Chazal are telling us, Bereshis bara Elokim yisei shamayim v'yisei. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. So Chazal tell us, the Medrash tells us, Bishvil Torah shedikras reishis. The objective of creation is for the fulfillment of Torah. And the only nation that has relevance to that Torah are only Bnei Yisrael. Bishvil Yisrael shedikras reishis. So the objective of creation can only be met by Klal Yisrael, only by the Jewish people, by no one else. So why are we so special? Why are we so significant? Why are we all-consuming? And we touch every aspect, and every decision in this existence is dependent on the Jewish people. Because we are the Chamisha Chumshi Torah. So the 5, by mentioning the 5 times, what he's saying, it's favoritism. He's not just favoring us. It's because we are Chamisha Chumshi Torah, because we are the basis for existence and the value of existence. And the objective is only Bnei Yisrael. Therefore he has a special love, because it's only through them can that objective be addressed and be met. Otherwise it doesn't happen. We had last week, the Medrash says that in the portion of Chukosai, that all blessing comes to this existence because of Klal Yisrael. And all curses comes as a result of the Jews failing. And if the nations of the world would understand that, they'd appoint 2 centuries to oversee the behavior of every Jew to make sure that he actually fulfills his obligation and toes the line the way he should. But not only don't they do that, they try to nullify and to sever our relationship with our religion, with God, which they don't understand what it's bringing upon them. So why is it chibos and lefonov? It's more than the love is before his eyes. Kaviyachol. It's much more than that. It's lefonov, because since every aspect, every nuance of existence, it's being infused to go forward or being detracted to regress, everything's dependent on the Jew's behavior. So it's always lefonov. It's always before him. We are the infusers and we are the detractors. We cause it to rise, we cause it to fall. Therefore, it's chibos and lefonov. It's always, you can't forget, it's like you have a light, a bright light, and all of a sudden it dims. You know immediately. Why is it dimming? Because there's an energy depletion, therefore, and when it gets brighter, there's an energy surge. You can't deny it, it's just a reality. So that's chibos and lefonov. Therefore, he counts us continuously. Because every aspect of the Jew, every Jew is a component in that totality which generates this entity called existence, terrestrial, celestial, every aspect of creation is touched upon by the behavior of the Jew. Just thinking, there's a concept known as Kol Yisrael Revim Zel Lozeh. Every Jew is responsible for one another. So the way the Or Chaim explains it in one location. Why? Because how do we guarantee that every Jew behaves properly? We all assume communal responsibility. We're responsible for one another. So now there's a halacha that if, let's say, a person did not fulfill his obligation of listening to the shofar, another Jew who's obligated, although he already fulfilled his personal obligation, he's able to cover the Jew who hadn't fulfilled his obligation, to blow the shofar on his behalf, that he should listen. Why? If you say, when you do it, you haven't yet fulfilled your obligation, so when you blow your shofar, that listening is a listening of obligation, because you haven't. So when he hears my blowing for myself, he could also be yotze. He could fill his obligation. But if I already have expended my obligation, why now could I cover him? So the commentators explain, because that's the concept of arevus. Kol yisrael arevim zeluzah. Every Jew was responsible. So since I'm responsible to make sure that my fellow fulfills his obligation, although I fulfilled my own personal obligation, I could fill in for the other person to interact with him to guarantee and assure him that he fulfills his obligation. This is the concept of, it's based on the concept of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeluzah. That's the understanding. But why? It's even more than somebody else. That to make sure everybody does his thing. But why is it so important? Because every Jew is a contributing factor to the totality. The Jews were counted. Every Jew was counted. Every male above the age of 20 was counted. Why was it counted? The counting and the continuous counting is to inform us chiboson lefonov. Every Jew is vital for the objective of creation. What is the objective of creation? What does every Jew touch upon? Either you advance it or you detract from it, and you cause regression. Why? Because every Jew is integral to the totality of existence. So if every Jew is integral, so that means I have to be responsible for my fellow, because he's integral. Because if he doesn't address his obligation, the whole system starts failing. That's the reason why Hashem says, since you're all interconnected, each one are responsible for the other to make sure we go forward and we don't go backwards for that reason. That's the understanding. The Torah makes it a point. You should count them, the heads of the Jewish people. Torah uses the term b'mispar shemos, the numbers of names, kol zachor, every male, l'gugulosa, with the medium of the machzah shekel, counting the half silver coins. Then you know how many males are above the age of 20. So over here, there's a sefarno. Why does it say b'mispar? What is b'mispar shemos? The number of the names. According to the number, you have 600,000 males above the age of 20. We know the number, but it says more than that. The number of the names of those people. It's important to know the names of each one of those people. There's Chaim and Shimon and Ruvain and Kolev and whoever each one of them is. It's important the name. What is the significance of the name, the number of the names of the people? So the Sefarno explains, Ki hoya oz kol echad ma'usador nechshav bishmo hamor al tsuroso ha'ishiyas. What does a name reveal? A name reveals the essence and the dimension of that person, of the personage. That's what it does. So if a person is special, you have a bunch of cats, lahavdil, and you have Tim, and you have Cutie, and you have this one. They're all cats, the same cats. That's all they are. They have, the value is only they're a cat. You happen to name them, that's how you identify which cat is cat. But when we talk about a name of a human being and the Torah going out of its way to say you must identify by the name itself reveals the dimension and the personage and the status of that individual. So that's what Torah is saying. It's not just knowing the number. Understand that this number is not an ordinary number. That each one of these individuals, 600,000 above the age of 20, the males, each one was a dimension unto itself, unto himself. You know, it's interesting, the way it says, the Jews, when they were born in Egypt, it was Shisha Bekeres Achas, 6 in one litter. And it says, Vayifru, Vayirbu, Vayatzmu. Vayatzmu. So the way Vayatzmu is explained, that normally if you have sextuplets, some of them are sickly. The 6 that were born in one litter, each one was healthy. It was like an independent birth. It was like a single birth. The 6, each one was like a single birth. That's the way they interpret Vayatzmu. Others interpret Vayatzmu means that it was each one was an independent personality. Yatsum means you say you have leaders, you have followers. Each one had an atzmius. He had an identity unto himself. It wasn't you had followers and you had leaders. Each one had a leadership quality. So therefore, that's this generation. We're talking about this. The generation that left Egypt. These are the Shisha Bekeres Achas. This is 6 in 1 letter. Each one of them was an atzmoi. He was independent. He had something to display his uniqueness. Each one was unique. Therefore, it's Shmosam. It's Mispar Shemos. The number according to the name. So over here he explains. Al derech ve'edocha b'shem, lo kein kora l'dor boyoretz. 40 years later, when the Jews went into Canaan, the new generation, it doesn't mention they should be counted by name, just by number. V'chein lo nimnu b'mispar shemos. V'lo niskru zelosi roshi ha'mishpachos u'mispar ishim. It only mentions the heads of the families and the number of individuals. That's it. It does not say they should be known by name. Through this, the Torah is revealing to us because all the Torah is telling us that these individuals, these 600,000 males above the age of 20, they're going to conquer the land, they're going to inherit the land. And none of them are going to die. They're going to live to take over the land. But here, it's more than just telling us a number. This is telling us each number of the great number is an individualized person, and that's Mispar Shemos. And it makes sense, as I said. The Balaturim points out over here, but he says differently, but you're able to understand the same way. He says, why over here does it say Mispar Shemos? Why did we merit? The Jews were idolaters in Egypt. So it says, because Loshina Lishonam, Shmam Umalbusham. Because they kept their identity. So therefore it's Mispar Shemos. These people, they're the ones, despite the acculturation of Egypt, they became pagans. But their names they kept. They kept their names. That's what Mispar Shemos is. It's something unique, something unusual. It's something which is admirable. They kept their names. Therefore here, the generation after 40 years, that wasn't the generation in Egypt who kept their names despite everything else. Right? They were the children of of the previous generation. But it's the same idea. To be able to keep your name despite the acculturation and the paganism, it says something about the person. That's something unique. Especially, the Gemara tells us that, quotes a posuk, that one's destiny lies in his name. It's a Shmo Kagorim. That one's name reveals the destiny of every person. And therefore it says, let's say, Rus, the grandmother of David HaMelech, Rus HaMoviah, Rus the Moabite, wife we should call Rus, that she was going to merit a grandchild who's going to be Merava HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Shiras Ishbachos. He will say to Hashem with song and praise. So in the name Rus already forecasted she was going to have this special grandson. That was the name Rus. So the Gemara says, Shmo Kagorim, within a name lies the destiny. But that's everybody's name. Everybody's name. It's famous Orach Chaim HaKodesh, that although we have no prophecy, that when a parent gives a name to his child, it's prophetic. Hashem puts the name in their mind, because the name the child receives is prophetic. It reveals the destiny of that child, what the destiny of that child will be for the rest of his life. But that's true with every name. It's just not a label. However, but it's not that uniqueness. That's just to say that's a personal destiny. But here the Torah says, in regard to the totality of Klal Yisrael, they should be counted Mispar Shemos. Evidently, this is to reveal the uniqueness of Klal Yisrael. These names aren't ordinary names. These names are that each person is unique in his own right. That's the name over here. we find at the beginning of Shmos, it says, Elu Shmos B'nai Yisrael, Haboy Mitzrayimah. These are the names of the B'nai Yisrael who came to Egypt. Es Yaakov, Vonov, Ishu Beis Sabo, it goes, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. So over here, the Sephorno says, Ve'elu Shmos, Elu Niskarm Bekam Hoyuruyim Lahu Voda B'Shem. These individuals who are coming to Egypt, it's important and it's appropriate they should be known by name. Who are they? Just not 70 individuals come to Egypt. These are one of a kind of individuals. Each person should be valued, each man by name, Hamora al Tsuroso Hoishis, which reveals Tsuroso, his profile of his personage. And these people, as long as they lived, when did the Jews become idolaters? When this generation passed away. They were the luminaries. During their life, they were the luminaries. And because they were the luminaries, the generation did not go off the path. But after this generation, who the luminaries passed away, the tzaddikim did not have that dimension of value in the eyes of God and the eyes of people. They weren't valued by the Jews who were there, their fellows, and by God himself. Because sometimes if you have a tzaddik being valued by God, his impact and his representation has a special effect. But because they themselves were not on that level, they did not have the effect. It's like it says that as long as Yaakov, it says, why is Parshas Vaychi, Parshas Stuma, why is it a sealed portion, paragraph structure? Because when Yaakov passed away, it's Nista Meineim V'Liman Shel Yisrael B'nei Hashibut. They became shut down. Somehow there was some level of infiltration, a subliminal effect. So the Maharal explains, as long as Yaakov is alive, his dimension of being, his dimension of holiness, it's as if they weren't in Egypt. He created an insular environment, spiritual environment. Nothing could seep in from the outside. I mean, how do you raise a family in the house of Lavan that your children are shiftei koh, that consider the tribes of God, with such influences, with such level of the worst? It's literally perversion, idolatry, cardinal sins being rampant. How? It had no relevance to his family. No relevance whatsoever. When he was in Choron, it's as if he wasn't in Choron. When he was in Egypt, it's as if he was not in Egypt. But when he passed away, because his representation was no longer there, it was Nistam Liban. Beineim, they started to shut down. Spiritually, they were impacted at some level. Still over the story, there was a famous Mashgiach, Mir Mashgiach. He led the Mir Yeshiva from Mir, Poland, to Vladivostok, to Kobe, Japan, to Shanghai, and then eventually to Brooklyn after the war. And then after he went to Israel. He became the Mashgiach in Panovich Yeshiva. His name was Reb Chatzkel Levenstein, Zecher Tzadok Livrocha, very holy man. And the year he was in the United States, so one of his students, who he and his wife lost everybody in the war. They were the only survivors of the family, and they were very close with him. And the second birth of this woman, she had given birth to her oldest child in Shanghai. They were married in Shanghai. They had a boy, a son. And the second birth were triplets. 2 boys and a girl. He lived in East New York. That's where the Jews lived. This is 1947. That's when they were born. And in those days, Jews in the summertime, they would go out to Coney Island. They rent a little bungalow cottage, 1 or 2 room cottage, and that's where it was. So Chatzkel Levenstein was a very holy man, very holy. And holy to the point it was scary. You know, he was divinely inspired. He led the Mir Yeshiva, told them exactly where to travel and not to travel. And when he would go in a car, the car had blinds in it. The car had blinds, so he should not be able to look out. He was so careful what he would look at. He had very pure, holy eyes. And he was asked by the father of these 2 were boys, so that means 2 of the children needed a bris, that he should be the sandik at the bris. So the car pulled up early in the morning. This is Coney Island in the summertime. And it pulled up at the sidewalk. It's early in the morning. Nobody's on the street. That's how early it is. And they opened the car door. He ran quickly into the cottage, looking at the ground. And right after bris was completed, ran right back to the car. Window shades, blinds on the windows. He said to those who were closest to him, it cost him 2 weeks to get back to where he was before. Just going into that environment, representing where there's a lack of proper modesty. Nobody was in the street, it's the location. Somehow, at his level, he was affected. He was diminished because of it. So you can imagine being in Egypt. If Yaakov's there generating this level of Kedusha, not only that, the Avos HaKadoshim, they were Hein Merkava. He was the equivalent of the Holy of Holies. You know, when God is with you, anything negative is totally vaporized. Can't even come near you. But what happens if Yaakov is not there? That means the Shekhinah is not there. It's no longer the Holy of Holies. So things start seeping in. You become worn down at some infinitesimal level, but you're worn down, you're affected. There's a midrash. We know that we went out to the desert. We had no provisions. We had no protection from the elements. We had no water. But yet, Hashem provided everything for us. What protected us from the elements and from the scorpions and the snakes and the vipers? We had the clouds of glory. And why would they walked, the clothing didn't wear out. They didn't even have to launder the clothing. The Ani HaKavod, the clouds of glory, did everything. It was miraculous. We had the Be'er Shel Miriam, we had the wellspring of Miriam, which traveled with us, which gave sufficient water not only for the people, for the livestock. And then there was the manna. The manna. Any thought, any type of food that the person would want, that wafer-like material should take on, nourishment-wise, taste-wise, even texture-wise, it will take on that taste in the person and nourish the person's body. That was the miracle of the man. And after the day, it became putrid. They had to eat it, and it was miraculous. As much as you collected, as little as you collected, they always had enough for a daily stipend. Erev Shabbos, Friday, always double. Enough to cover you for 2 days, Friday and Shabbos. And it would fall every morning, because Shabbos they were not permitted to go out. So the Gemara tells us in Tainis that the mun was in the merit of Moshe. The clouds of glory were in the merit of Aaron, and the bear, the wellspring, was in the merit of Miriam. That's what's called Be'er Shel Miriam. It's the wellspring of Miriam, okay? So when Hashem took us into the desert, what's normally a desert? You have a king who lives in the palace. Does he have the comforts and the amenities of the palace in the desert? Definitely not. But we were taken out of Egypt, out of bondage. And where does God take us? Into a desert, which is equivalent of a palace. Because what he provided for us, every comfort, every level of protection, we didn't feel the heat. We weren't exposed to the elements, not to any danger. It was just focusing and living in the spiritual cocoon. So Hashem says, did I take you into a desert? Although in the physical sense, you didn't experience it as a desert. Not only that, I provide for you 3 redeemers who are continuously at your beck and call, who attend to all your needs. Shenemar, cites a verse in Micha, Ve'eshlach v'necha es Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. I sent there Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. They are the Goalim, the Redeemers, who are there to attend to all your needs and requests and give you guidance. B'schus Moshe achalta b'samon. In the merit of Moshe, you ate the manna. How do we know that? Shenemar. Vayamcha v'arivecha. When you ate the man, you were afflicted and you were starved. Here, that's b'schus Moshe. Now you tell me, how does this verse in the Torah in any way allude to the fact that the man was in the merit of Moshe? Because it says, Vayamcha, from the word inui, he afflicted you and he starved you. What does this mean? Seems to be, we have psukim where maybe it's a little more illusionary to that, but this pasuk, Vayamcha v'yarivecha, how does this even allude to it? Even the slightest hint, what is it? So I was thinking about it. Now, the Gemara tells us in Yuma, firstly, if the man took on every level of nourishment, fully nourished, and there was no negative, there was no waste, there wasn't any digestion, nobody had digestive issues in the desert. It was absorbed in the inner organs. The man, it was miraculous. So why were we afflicted? Why were we not sated? Why were we always felt we were still hungry? Why? Vayivecha. So the Gemara tells us that eating and being nourished sufficiently is not enough to satisfy you. That the visual aspect of seeing food as what it is a very significant part of satisfying a person and giving a certain sense of satisfaction and even pleasure. And feeling sated contributes to the satiation of the person. So since the man, what it looked like was like a wafer. It's true, when you put it in your mouth, all of a sudden it took on all the properties and characteristics and tastes and nourishment of whatever that may be. But when you looked at it, the visual was not there. So therefore, you were afflicted. You did not have that pleasure. You still felt denied. You were never felt satisfied. Therefore, the Gemara says a person who's blind, Rav Yosef says he was blind, as much as he would eat, he never felt satisfied. Because since he didn't have the visual part of being able to see the food, he was never satisfied. So Gemara says, therefore, on Shabbos, when you eat, you should eat in an illuminated location to have true only Shabbos. Because if you see the display of the food and the attractiveness of the food, that's significant in giving you pleasure and satisfying you. It's not just the eating of the food itself. Okay? So that's why it's Vayamcha v'yarivecha. Okay? There's a Orach Chaim HaKodesh we had. The Torah tells us in regard to the oil that was used for the menorah, it says, Shemen zayzoch kosis lamor. Only the first droplet of oil that was extracted from the olive qualified for the menorah, for illumination. Okay? It says kosis lamor. So over there, the Orach Chaim HaKodesh cites a Zohar. We had 4 exiles. We had Golas Bovel. We had the exile of Bovel. We had Golus Parasamodai, the Persian Mede. That was during the 70-year period also. Then we had Golus Yavon, the Greek exile. And now we're still experiencing the exile of Edom. The Edomite exile. It's more than 2,000 years already. So the Zohar says, in whose merit were we redeemed from the exile of Babylon? b'schus Avram, merit of Avram Avinu. Parsu Madai, that was b'schus Yitzchak. Yavan was b'schus Yaakov. And who will we be redeemed from the exile of Edom? That's b'schus of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, however, Moshe Rabbeinu will not allow his merit to be used until Klal Yisrael studies Torah Lishma. It's not enough to study Torah. You must study Torah on a qualitative level for the sake of Torah. And it's Shem and Zayis Zoch. It has to, Shem and Zayis always refers, that's illumination, that's the Torah itself. It has to be pure, without sediment. And it says kosis. You have to forego physical pleasures. That's how you study Torah. You have to forego that. Like a person has to go into exile to study Torah. You have to give up things. Pas melch tochal ma'im sur tishteh, al oretz tishon, chayt sar ticheh. A person has to be willing to give up the amenities of life for the sake of Torah. Only when the Jews reach that level that they're willing to give that all up, only then, Moshe says, now you can use my merit. We're not there yet. And because we're not there yet, Moshe does not allow his merit to be used, to be extricated from the Edomite exile. The Midrash tells us, Lo nitna Torah el ochlei haman. The Torah was given to those who ate the manna, for 40 years. What does that mean? So the way I think it's understood, what was the man? The man really was, as the Ramban explains, was spiritual. I mean, I have a wafer-like cracker, wafer, and it provides every level of nourishment. No waste. If it's a physical entity, there should be waste. No waste. It's only because we had to eat it, it had to be put into a physical form. But in terms of what it really was spiritual. That's the reason why it was absorbed in the inner organs. That's what it was. So because it was the equivalent of the radiance of God sustaining us. So if you're that connected, so your level of purity and holiness is that special level. Therefore, you process the Torah at a different level. Therefore, the Torah el ochlei haman. The Torah was given to those who ate the man. That's the way I think the way it's understood. However, with this, no, the man was vayantcha ve'erivecha. You were afflicted and you were starved. You have to be in a state of deprivation to be able to process the Torah properly. That's why. They were nourished, they were healthy, but they felt they were lacking. Vayantcha, there was inui, there was affliction. And that's Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu said, Lechem lo ochalti mayim lo shosisi. Arboim yom v'arba'im layah. For 40 days, 40 nights, I did not eat bread, I did not drink water. So the Medrash asks, and if he did? What difference does it make? He's telling us his predicament. And if he did, so the Medrash says, what Moshe was saying to the Klal Yisrael, that just as I Mosarti chelbi v'domi oleo, I gave up my fat and my blood. Factually, he was physically diminished because he didn't eat. He was healthy because God willed he should live. But factually, physically, he was worn down. So just as only in that state was I able to study and process the Torah because I was removed from physicality. If you want to process Torah at that advanced level, you must also give your fat and blood. You have to be Mosi Yadam and Chalif for Torah. What is that? That's Vayantcha Yerivecha. That's exactly what the man is. What Moshe had in heaven, it was a semblance on that on the terrestrial level. That was Vayantcha Yerivecha. You were afflicted and you were starved by God, although you were nourished for 40 years. Lo nid the Torah el ochlei haman. The Torah was given to ochlei haman because that is the state, the ultimate state, to be able to be the repository and the processing center to process that spiritual information for that reason. Therefore, how do we know this alludes to Moshe Rabbeinu? Man was b'schus Moshe, that's synonymous with Moshe. Moshe himself says, the only time I will let you use my merit, only if you deny yourself and deprive yourself from the pleasurable amenities of life, because only then will you be able to acquire Torah properly. Therefore, I will not allow my schus to be utilized to extricate you from the Edomite exile. But it's interesting. Moshe is the ultimate Kol Yaakov. The only way we could break from that Edom is with the real Kol Yaakov. Now, who has that real Kol Yaakov? That's Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu Shokol Keneged Yisrael. He's the equivalent of Klal Yisrael. So if he shifts his merit into our side of the equation, we topple Edom. But he says, I will not give it unless you reflect who I am, to some degree who I am. Only then, that's when I'll shift it over into your column. Until then, I'm not shifting it into your column. Just finish with this midrash. V'daber Hashem al Moshe midbar Sinai. Ad shelo-hukam Mishkan, before the Mishkan was built, erected. Diber imo b'sneh. Where did God communicate with Moshe? At the burning bush. Shenemar. V'yikra elo v'elokim mitoch hasneh. Achrei chen, when was the next time God spoke to him? B'midyon. Shenemar yom Hashem el Moshe b'midyon. To return. Achrei diber imo b'mitzrayim. Shenemar yom Hashem el Moshe v'elar be'eretz Mitzrayim lemor. Achrei chen diber imo b'Sinai. Then he spoke to Moshe in Sinai. Shenemar. V'yidaber Hashem Moshe b'midbar Sinai. Kevat shehukam Mishkan. But once the Mishkan was erected, Oma Yofi Hatznius. That it's appropriate that when we communicate, it should be in a very concealed, modest setting. That when you interact with God, it should be in a inconspicuous, a modest setting. It shouldn't be public. So Ol Moed was a concealed location. Nobody was privy to what was going on. It was a personal conversation. What is the kfuda, the honor of the Bas Melech, the princess Penima? She's beautiful, she's special, she has every quality. It's not for the public eye. What is she? She's not public property. Therefore, it's called kfuda Bas Melech Penima. Levusha, Mishpos Zov Levusha. She has greater value than gold sockets. Bas Melech. She's a Bas Melech. A princess is a daughter of a king. What's Bas Melech? It's a verse in Tehillim. Zem Moshe. Moshe is Bas Melech. Shenema v'tvi'u lebas Paro. V'hi lo leven. It's interesting. And Bas is a daughter. It's a Ben Melech. It says Zem Moshe. Why is he called Bas Melech? Because it says that they brought Moshe when he was taken out of to Bas Paro. After he was nursed by his mother and he was weaned, she brought him to Bas Paro. And she took him on as a son. Now, so what is this? So it's still Ben Melech. Now, who was Bas Paro? She was a special woman. She converted to monotheism. She raised him initially. So therefore, it's Bas Melech. The reason why he was the prince was because he was given over to Bas Paro. I mean, why at that moment did he survive? She should have toppled him, turned him over, and he should have drowned, or she should have attempted to drown him, as her maidservants tried to do. And Hashem sent the Malach and had them killed. Because what was she going down to bathe in the Nile? So the Gemara says, to cleanse herself from the idolatry of her father. It was a conversion to monotheism. So because she would, and what did she see? When she opened the basket, it says she saw the Shechina in the basket with Moshe. How many people are privy to see Shechina? You have to be at a very special level. That's who she was. So therefore she's Bas Melech. Moshe was able to develop, despite it was the palace of Paro, because he was Bas Melech. Because he was overseen and taken care of by the Bas Melech. Umelech az yimshel bam. And the fierce king, he will dominate them. Ze Moshe. Why is he called Melech? Shoye Malko Shel Torah. Shenikra Oz. What is the power of the Jewish people? The power is the Torah. He's the king of that Torah. Shnema Hashem Oz Lamo Yitain. What did God give us? He gave us power. Leficha Kol Kvuda Basmelch Pnima. Mitshum Zov Levusha. Zaaron. So again, Yovet Snius. Initially, there's another message that says, a little child, her father's a king, and she walks with her father in a public location. The king has to display his love for his child, despite the fact is it's not appropriate, a king to show his affection for his daughter, but because his daughter hasn't yet matured sufficiently, how would the daughter take it? Father doesn't love her, so he has to display the affection despite. But once the daughter becomes an adult, what does he say to his daughter? From now on, I will show only my affection in a private location. It's not for the masses to see. It's something very special, and it's not appropriate to show it in public. The same thing. Initially, when Hashem took us as His people, we were just beginners. So Sinai was a public event. The whole world knew about it. But ultimately, where did it end up? It was the Mishkan. So it's also the Kol Kvuda Basmelch Pnima, because now we understand the nature of our relationship. Now we could go private, and it no longer has to be public.